Welcome to the Bike Talk with Dave podcast. I'm your host, Dave Mabel, and I appreciate you tuning in. Now, can you imagine getting on your bike Friday right after work and heading out onto unknown gravel roads and riding all night long and not stopping until you hit 300 miles? Crazy, right? 300 miles. That's like riding from Phoenix to Las Vegas, or Baltimore to Hartford, Connecticut, or St. Louis to Chicago for the Midwestern folks. It's a long freaking way. It's far enough that if you flew, your flight would be long enough for you to get a tiny bag of pretzels and a cup of ice with a little bit of soda in it. So now imagine that it's a race. And for the whole night, all 300 miles, you've kept your pace up to almost 20 miles an hour on average. Think about that. That's amazing. Superhuman, right? So now after all that, you're not even alone. Someone else was doing just exactly the same thing and going exactly that fast. And the finish line comes into sight and you are racing for the line after 300 miles. Holy freaking moly, what a race. That is exactly the situation for our guest today, Chris Mehlman, a professional endurance mountain biker and gravel racer who found himself in that scenario at the 2024 Garmin Gravel Worlds in Lincoln, Nebraska. Chris and I had met at the Rattlesnake Gravel Grind. It's a great gravel event in March in Sweetwater, Texas that you all should put on your calendar. I didn't say y'all very good, did I? That y'all should put on your calendar. No offense, Texans. Anyway, when I heard about his Gravel World's long voyage experience, I just had to hear his story. So let's dive into it with Chris Mehlman. Chris Mehlman, what a treat to have you on Bike Talk with Dave. We met at Rattlesnake Gravel Grind, and I want to ask you a bit about that, but we met at the Rattlesnake Gravel Grind in March, and I have to admit, like, you're a good storyteller. I was like, I got to have this dude on sometime. And then you rocked out Gravel Worlds, the long voyage, and I'm going to keep people in suspense for that for now, but after you did so well on the long voyage sailing the gravel seas of Lincoln, Nebraska, I was like, it's time, we got to hit this thing. And I'm sure you've got great stories from Gravel Worlds and other stuff. But anyway, welcome to Bike Talk with Dave. It's a treat to have you on and a treat to see you again.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and I really enjoyed your last episode with Curtis. He's a good friend of mine, so that was cool that you had him on. So
he's a good dude. I've enjoyed Curtis for a long time, and he's a good storyteller too, isn't he?
Yeah, he's great. What was it? Mayor Curtis or whatever we called him. He's quite the character, and he's obviously gives a very different perspective on gravel. I've talked a lot about that with him, just because he's coming from probably about as different as you can get from gravel.
His A races are an hour long of max heart rate, and yours are
my nightmare. That's for sure.
Right. Do you know him from Massachusetts? You're a Massachusetts boy.
Yeah, so he actually moved a few years ago to the one town over from where my parents live, and so I was there during COVID, and I spent a lot of time riding with him. Whenever I go home, I try and ride with him as well. But he and his now wife live there, and his wife works there, and it's also where you may know like Stu Thorne, who ran Canada Cyclocross World. So he lives in that same town, and yeah, it's cool. I mean, it's also, I'm sure you've heard of the Grand Prix of Gloucester. It used to be a big event.
Yep.
My parents live about on the same road as that and about 3 miles away. Unfortunately, cool. It doesn't exist anymore, but I'm almost embarrassed to admit that growing up in New England, I've never raced a single cyclocross race, despite, that's really the heartbeat of cyclocross. So yeah, someday.
Wow. Huh. I'm surprised to hear that, because I know you grew up, racing in the dirt, racing in the woods, mountain biking, and I don't know, I feel like mountain biking and cyclocross have close ties, knobby tires anyway. I mean, that might
Yeah.
be where the similarity ends, but I'm surprised you have that you haven't done much cross or any cross.
Yeah, I mean, I love going to the races. Like when I'm home, it's just they're just a good, just they're kind of just like big parties. Like I guess the most similar comparison might be like hill climbing in Great Britain. Like I have a friend
Mm.
from Great Britain. We're just talking about it, and it's people go there. It's like a really short race, knock out your race, and then I would say people spend the rest of the day drinking and hanging out with friends and stuff. And cross is kind of similar in that way, New England. And yeah, I mean, there are some races out here in Colorado, but I'm not gonna lie, like I just can't imagine racing cross here. It's there's something about like it needs to be the right weather, and we just don't have those conditions in weather. And there's something about New England that's a lot more similar to Belgium and the Netherlands and stuff, and so it just is a natural home for cross. So
Yeah, that's hard to argue with you on the weather thing and the Colorado thing, but there definitely has been some talent that's come out of that the colorful Colorado. Katie F. and Compton, Caroline Mani lives in the Springs.
yep,
Um, doesn't Nash live in the Springs or
I'm
somewhere
not
around there?
sure. Katie
Cat-
Keough lived in the Springs.
Katie Keogh.
Let's see,
Um,
Boulder, we got Brunner, you got Funston, you got
Sonny
some of
Gilbert
the
lived outside of Boulder. Lives
yep,
outside of Boulder.
BJ.
Not
Some of
racing.
the BJC kids were who were really good. So it is interesting that there is such a contingent of racers that lived here, and that may be something to do. It's from a mountain bike perspective, and now from a gravel perspective, and traditionally from a road perspective, this is always a great place to live and train. Um, but yeah, for me, it always seemed like if I had been a pro crosser, I would have moved to the other home of cross, which is probably East Hampton, Mass, or Northampton, Mass. So you got like Hyde lived there, Powers lived there. Um, Rebecca Farringer, she lives in Bend, but she used to live in New England. Ellen Noble,
Mm,
Northampton. So
yep.
there's kind of the Rocky Mountain home, and then there's the New England home. So
I thought you were going to say Iowa City, Iowa, but I don't know.
I
That's
mean,
just
I
my
mean,
bias.
yeah, exactly. You guys, I heard. Haven't been following the race schedule too much, but it sounds like some of the World Cups were pulled from the calendar. So it sounds like there's no Jingle Cross. There's no like they've really slimmed things down, which is a little bit of a bummer. But
Yep,
hopefully that comes
yep, for
back.
sure. That was part of Curtis's and my discussion was kind of the state of cross in the U.S. But I don't
Yep,
know. He's hopeful. He's still carrying the flag, and I love it. And like you said, he's a good dude.
exactly. Yep.
So you're living in the Springs. You're racing dirt, a lot of dirt, and I don't know. I would have described you heavy into mountain biking, but you do a lot of gravel too. Um, but as I look back in your resume, I don't know. It's kind of a mixed bag from Breck Epic to UCI Marathon World Championships on a mountain bike. Like that's pretty freaking cool. So
Yeah.
you got some mountain bike chops, and you can ride a gravel bike too.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess I started racing mountain bike in high school, sophomore year of high school, 2016. I'd already been riding a mountain bike some. In New England, there's a pretty good community, and I'd say since I even started when I was probably 11, 12, it's really really grown. But they started a high school league in New England in 2016, separate from NICA. So it used to be called NESCA, New England High School Cycling Association, and now it's called NEYC, so New England Youth Cycling, because it's not just high schoolers anymore.
Hmm.
So I started racing there, and those were like 40-minute races and stuff, and just a really good way to get into it, and also for me a great way to meet other riders my age. And I showed up to the first race, and yeah, it was like 120 kids or something, and I was like, holy crap! Like I didn't know these many kids mountain biked in New England, and now it's like 1,200 kids.
Oh my!
Um, Actually, a couple of years ago, it was 1,200. It's probably more than that. So one of my very good friends, Kelly Catali, um, who also races mountain bike and gravel. She is now the lead director, and which is amazing. She's like the perfect person for that. But that was how I got my start, and then yeah, I didn't start racing gravel till 2022, and between starting racing, getting to gravel, I kind of progressed through the UCI like XEO series because that was kind of you know I haven't been doing it that long, but when I started, gravel wasn't really I mean, it was a thing, but like it wasn't like a big thing. And so the main way to go was, the UCI XCO series. And so then I joined Bear National Team in 2020. Obviously that year was, I think I had one race or two races, and then stayed with them in 2021. And then I decided, I didn't really enjoy XCO. I'm not suited to it. My max sprint is very terrible, like really, really bad. I think the only way I can win is, yeah.
Cyclocross is not on your
Oh
agenda.
yeah, exactly. I mean, I do it for fun, but I'd never be good at it. So I just decided to, go all in on the marathon stuff because I had done some marathon races prior to that. And I was like, let's try gravel as well. And so my first race was Mid South in 2022. And man, it's only been a couple of years, but it's changed so much. It's so much faster than it was. Like even Mid South, just as a comparison, like first year I did it, the first hour was just like rolling along, nice and chill. And then the second year, last year, uh, it was like an XCO race start. And then this year, on the same course as last year, I went like 15 minutes faster and 7 minutes faster, something like that, and finished like 15 spots lower.
Oh my.
So it keeps keeps changing a lot, even just in a few years. So.
Yeah. Well, I mean, no joke. Like, I feel like if you want to make a living on a bike in the United States, like gravel's an actually good way to go.
Yeah,
And when there's dollar bills involved, then speed goes up. People are fighting for
exactly.
dollar bills.
Yeah, and I always say that gravel's in its like teenage years. It's a little awkward. It doesn't,
Yep.
it's making some bad decisions. Maybe yeah, not using drugs like some teenagers would do or underage drinking, but just safety wise and stuff like that. But I think it's tough because there are people who, even pros who are like, say some of the ex-World Tour pros who got into the sport, like, this is great. I don't really have to train much. I can just kind of go enjoy it. Now it's like, if you want to do well, even if you're an ex-World Tour pro, you got to be training really hard.
You got to be ready
So,
for sure.
so it's balancing like this quote unquote spirit of gravel and the, relaxed nature and stuff, and the front end of the pack. And I think there's some races that do that really well. So like Gravel World's great example, Rattlesnake, another great example. And then, but yeah, at some point I think it's gonna have to start establishing some more rules and, really separating out the pro fields and stuff. I think that will be the natural progression.
Yeah, it is interesting. And in teenage awkward years is a perfect description because, like, every year things change. And not only do they change in gravel cycling as a whole, like races change year to year. For instance,
Yeah.
Gravel Worlds splits up the elite or the pro men and then the pro women. They both start separately from the, I don't know, age group or amateur men or whatever,
Yeah.
which are hardly amateur. I mean, those guys are cooking too, the front of the pack. But
Yeah.
a good friend of mine who I ride with regularly, that's generous. That's a generous statement of mine. Whose back of the wheel I see riding away from me on a regular basis. um, Jake Johnson, he got second at
Yeah.
Gravel Worlds in the 150 this year.
Yep.
And, to him, it's like, I'd kind of like to be into the pro field. Like, it'd be fun to race those guys. So he
Yeah.
likes it together. And I know the pros, especially the women, I heard nothing but good things about the women having their own race, the elite women having their own race.
Exactly.
And Gravel Worlds even threw some money in if the to any I think it was to any elite women who are still ahead of the amateur men, quote unquote, age group men. What do they even call that race?
Yeah. Like age group, I guess. Yeah.
Age group. By a certain point, I don't remember where that certain point
Yeah.
was, 80 miles in or 75
It
miles
was
in.
85-mile aid station. It was a like a decent chunk of money, I think, per
It
person.
was a
Like it
decent chunk of
was,
money, but like Marissa
yeah,
Boaz, who's a good friend, she's like, it was huge motivation. Like,
yeah,
we are not letting those guys catch us. And
yeah,
then Jake is behind her. He's like, we want to catch them so bad. So it is interesting, but again, it's awkward teenage years. Like, I don't know, we're figuring out these race dynamics as we go, and I don't know. Spirit of Gravel is I don't know, riding your bike on gravel, I guess. Smiling when you do it.
Yeah, exactly. I think the biggest thing for me is that, I don't mind, there's a lot of controversies with equipment and all that stuff. The biggest thing for me is the safety side. And I've definitely seen some events and stuff where it's just gotten a little out of hand. And I think that's something where, if you've got, you know, 2,000 person mass start and the roads are still open and suddenly there's a car coming in, everyone's got to move to one side of the road. It's just chaos. And I think that's where, like, I did gravel nationals last year, and that was the first gravel event I've done where it was a separate start. And we had, because it was USA Cycling, we had like a rolling road closure for the pro men and pro women,
Oh,
like
so
you
you
would in
got
a
the
road
whole
race.
road.
And yeah, and like, to be honest, the pro men's field was small enough. You didn't really need that. But having a separate start was like, it was just a totally different dynamic. Obviously for the women, it's even bigger deal, but even for the men, like, everyone in the field was really fast, but the field was so small, it was so much less stressful because there wasn't like, oh, I need to make sure my positioning is really, really good. I need to make sure like all this is, like I'm following the right people. It's like everyone there was, essentially everyone there was a good wheel to follow. And, positioning wise, it didn't take very long to get back to the front. So that was a very interesting experience, I would say.
Yeah, huh? That's interesting. Um, how's that compare? And I'm jumping here because I want to talk a little bit about
Yep.
um, Marathon World Championships. Obviously, they're they're probably middle-aged adults as far as the maturity of those events, or are they old men? I
Yep.
think maybe road racing is old men, but
I'd say road
cranky
racing
old
is old
men.
men, and those are, yeah, because mountain biking is a little bit newer, but yeah.
Yeah, yep, yep. Um, like, what's it like when you go to Worlds? Like, what's the racing like? Um, who you racing again? Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, for me, obviously, I'm starting near the back and have no expectations of doing well by most people's standards. So for me, it's just to see how far can I get up. But I mean, the level of aggression it's insane. Like, there's in a local race, you never be that guy. You don't want to be that guy who like elbows somebody or is really aggressive. But in those races, you have to be. If you
Huh?
aren't, you're gonna get pushed off to the side, and you're gonna lose a ton of positions. And so you have to be willing to put your elbows out. And I did one European gravel race this year, and it was the same thing. Like, the amount of yelling in the start. It was the track at 360. I mean, it was, you're starting on pavement. They're like, oh, don't worry, it's an uphill, it's a climb to start, it's pavement, nice and easy. Um, but that's like translate that to European roads, and what that means is it's a bike path size rolling wet road, and there's gutters on the other side where if you get off the road, you're screwed. And just the amount of yelling and skidding and wheels touching, and it was just terrifying. And it's the same with with Marathon Worlds. Like, first year I did it was in Denmark, and we started in a town center, and classic European town center. All There's no like front yards and stuff. The buildings come right up to the street, and the streets are all
Yep.
cobblestones, and so you're riding over wet cobblestones, and there's bollards and stuff. And then they sent us down some stairs, which is fine, but then you had to go up the other side, which also were stairs. So like, by the time we got out of the town, you know, obviously the front people are much stronger than me, but like those people are already, so far ahead distance wise. I mean, you could still see them, but like it was just a, different world. And there was even a, Vlad Daskalew, who since has been popped for doping, unfortunately, was a Red Bull athlete, Trek Factory Racing guy. And he started one row ahead, or two rows ahead of me. And he made it almost to the front, and then he just blew up because the amount of effort it takes to get to the front in those narrow streets and stuff. It's not like you got a highway to move up on. And that was pretty eye-opening, like, where I was like, this guy's one of the strongest guys in the world, and even he couldn't maintain a spot at the front once he chased back. So yeah, it's definitely a different dynamic. I mean, I can see why for a lot of the ex-World Tour pros it's so relaxing. Like, because I'm saying obviously the marathon worlds and the gravel racing in Europe's stressful, but I can only imagine road racing is like 50 times as stressful. So for ex-World Tour pros racing in America, it must be like it's like a vacation. I mean, it's
Chill. Yeah.
physically challenging, but like positioning wise, so easy for them. So yeah,
Right. Especially the wide gravel roads, and you have the whole road, and it's
exactly.
all
Yeah,
spread out in small groups. Yeah, I would think it'd be super easy, especially compared. And I mean, I watched the tour. The Vuelta's on right now, and they look like bike paths. I'm like, that's a road, and you're
yeah,
you're all like a huge peloton trying to get through there, and then, like you said, there's bollards
yeah,
speed bumps and corners and
yep,
uh, brick walls that you crash into and destroy your knee. Uh,
yep,
R.I.P. Wout Van Aert.
yeah.
He's not dead, just for clarification. He just hurt his knee, but we're sad to see him go. Anyway, um, yeah, that's crazy. So you were, it's kind of fun. I've done races where I knew the front was not a reality. And so I would intentionally start at the very back and see how many people I could pass. Did you kind of play that game at Worlds?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of times it's just like a time trial. Denmark was maybe a little different because there was more drafting. It was like, I think we averaged like 15 or 16 miles an hour. There was a lot of single
In a
track, but
mountain
it was
bike
all very
race?
flat. Yeah. So it
Huh.
was a lot more single track than, say, something like Leadville, but it just was so flat that you did have to think about like group dynamics and stuff. And if you were to try and bridge between groups. But last year in Scotland, that was not the case. It was just up and down, muddy, technical. And so it's more just a time trial to see like, okay, how many spots can I make it up? And I think last year was way less stressful for me, partly because it started, we had a stressful start and then we had a big climb. And I just was like really relaxed, like just try to stay within my limits. Anyway, I had plenty of time to pass people. And also I just knew what to expect. Yeah. And then this year, I mean, I don't think I'm going to Marathon Worlds. I think by the time this comes out, I will know. They reopened some petition spots for Worlds, and so I threw my name in the hat. And so I hope I get to go. It'd be cool because
Hmm.
it's in Snowshoe, West Virginia,
Oh, right.
and I've raced that course, and it's like um, for those listeners who know like what the National Ultra Endurance Series is, NUE. It felt like an NUE race, except you're racing against a bunch of Euro guys. I mean, it was like middle of nowhere. If you know West Snowshoe, West Virginia, there is no cell reception outside of the mountain, outside the resort, because it's in the National Radio Silence Zone. So like when I was pre-riding, I had my spotter in reach like tracker because I realized like if I crashed, no one was coming to find me. Like no one goes back there except for that race, and there's no cell reception. There's nothing, and it was one big loop. The feed zone was an hour and a half drive from the start. And it really felt like an NUE race, which is really cool, like a proper marathon mountain bike race, like US style. But it was a UCI event. The Europeans did not like that. There were lots
Right.
of complaints, which I understand because it was logistically quite challenging. And Snowshoe is not the easiest place to get to. But it looks like the course is going to be similar this year. So it's like
Huh.
first 3 hours are just like super chunky, rooty, rocky, muddy, technical stuff, and then kind of more of like a dirt road on the way back. But yeah, it's very very cool event. So hopefully I'm able to go back there.
So, like real single track mountain biking versus what we see in the Olympics, or if we watch a World Cup XCO race,
Yeah,
which are like pretty wide. I don't know. I mean, how would you describe an XCO course?
yeah. I mean, the new XCO World Cup courses are super super technical, but they're all man made. So like essentially most of the parts of the course, and especially the Olympics like every inch of the course is man made.
Right.
Whereas like a snowshoe marathon course, okay, starting at the resort, we rode up one of the downhill flow trails, which is man made, but everything else is just like natural.
Which is
Same
like
thing
single
last,
track,
yeah,
great single track.
yeah, and like stuff you just go ride, not trail center stuff. Last year at Glen Tress, the finish had some man made stuff because we were in like a you know British Trail Center, and they have like a whole network. But the whole
Hmm.
first part was all natural, super technical and stuff.
Huh.
I mean, even the last part was pretty technical as well, and mostly natural. It was just like the last probably half mile was like this bermed out flow trail that you could ride in a road bike. I mean, it was like really fun, but it was like quite a shot coming from super rooty, rocky stuff. But yeah, I mean, the World Cup courses are fair. I mean, there's stuff that I wouldn't want to ever ride. Like it's just incredibly technical. but I think the difference is now they're all man-made. So every there's like a whole course design, and they'll hire trail builder to come in and build all those features. So if you watch like the Crans Montana World Cup, they built a drop into, and the landing wasn't like dirt. The landing was stumps. So they had like 200 stumps, like all together, and that people were landing on that. And the problem is like, great idea, kind of a gimmick though, and also when it's wet, stumps are not great to land on, especially since you had to corner on the stumps. There were a lot of crashes. So yeah, I'd say that's the big difference between marathon and XCO. A lot of the marathon courses in Europe are a lot less technical, but in general, they're like you may not be climbing on dirt roads, but everything else is pretty natural. So,
Cool. And how big of a loop would they have in Europe?
usually they're like 100 kilometers. It totally depends. I think technically, to be considered a XEM in Europe for UCI, I think it's like 60 kilometers is minimum, or 70 kilometers. Most of the world champs are about 100 kilometers, so 60, high 50s, low 60 miles. I think world champs this year in snowshoe is going to be 65 miles or so, but it's
Wow.
the first part will take a long time, and then there are some like in Italy and Switzerland stuff where they just absolutely absurd amount of climbing. Like I did Swiss Epic last year, which was a stage race, and we had one stage that started and ended in the same spot. In 32 miles, we did 8,500 feet of climbing.
Wow.
And yeah, it was, I mean, just, Breck Epic has a lot of climbing, but somehow in Europe, they managed to find climbs that are even crazier than that. So that's, I'd say that's like kind of a big difference between here and here in Europe. So,
Cool. Well, good luck getting in Worlds. That'd be
yeah,
fun to cheer you on.
hopefully it works out. So we'll
I
see.
mean, if you're getting a late bid, you're probably getting a high number. So
Hopefully, I mean, I've got UCI points and stuff, and have a couple worlds under my belt, have a World Cup in snowshoe in the same course under my belt. So, hoping that helps. But also, I think the email they sent out was to a bunch of their previous athletes or current athletes, and that I think their goal was to get some of the lifetime athletes to come, because like
oh,
it'd be really cool to have someone like Keegan come. The problem is it's the weekend between two lifetime events. One of them is in Wisconsin, Michigan, wherever Squamigan is, Squamigan or
let's hear you
Schwamigan,
say
whatever
that
you
again.
pronounce. Yeah, Schwamigan. I don't
Oh,
even.
that was pretty good. That was pretty good.
Yeah, Schwamigan. There we go.
Yep.
And then the other one's in Colorado at elevation. So in West Virginia, snowshoe is probably one of the hardest locations to get to of any race in the country. It's 3 hours from Dulles, which is the closest big airport, and it's all back roads for the last like hour and a half of that. And yeah, so I mean, not ideal for lifetime athletes, unfortunately. But
Yeah. Well, we'll watch that with interest.
yeah,
Are you reading an email to say you got in right now?
no, sadly not. Got a text from my former boss about something. I used to
Dig
work
it.
at a shop called Jerry in Medford, Mass. Jerry Cycles. They still are massive supporters of me, and Brian, the owner there, is a very very good guy. So yeah, just just sending me a text about something. So
Awesome. Tell them hey.
silence that for the next hour though.
um, all right. So you've got a ton of long mountain bike, gravel. Yeah, I mean you've top five at Unbound XL a couple of times, like some
Yep.
serious long range chops, and it all culminates in the long voyage at Gravel Worlds this year. First of all, how would you describe what long voyage is? I'm curious to hear your description. I know how I would describe it, but I'm old.
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me it was kind of, I hate to say this, almost an afterthought because I think my main focus was Breck Epic, and I had a pretty rough early part of the season. I was really happy with the Breck Epic result, and I think it was so gravel. The long voyage was a week later, and I was like, we're just going to see how this goes. It's been on my list for a while. I would say the reason why I'd always wanted to do it is because it seemed like a less stressful version of Unbound XL. Unbound it's just a
Fair.
huge event. You go there and no matter who you are, there's so many people. There's so much hype around it. Especially since like the last time I went there after my first time. I went there with no pressure. The second time, I wanted to go win that race, and so it was very stressful. Whereas Long Voyage just seems like towards the end of the season, this will be a fun time. I knew Luke, a friend of mine, was racing, a few other guys, and I was like, this just seems cool, and it's not too far a drive. And so, and I would say that's exactly how it turned out to be. I mean, the whole event atmosphere kind of felt like a smaller event, but it was, yeah, it was just a great atmosphere in general. And I think it's kind of funny because I didn't really interact with any of the other distances until like after my finish, because packet pickup was the day before, but I went pretty early, so there was no one there. And then we started 5 p.m. the day before the other races started, and then we finished about 40 minutes after the first race of that day started. So when we finished, there was no one there. Like, it was just like the race. Like,
I was curious about that.
Jason and Sophia were the two race organizers, and they're like, "Your trackers were working. Like, why did you guys get in here so fast?" And then, no, there's just some volunteers because they were all. That was like the chill moment of the day, and it was pretty funny. And it's like, wow, this is like such a nice small event. And then I realized, oh wait, there's like 1,000. 1,300 other people at this event. We just managed to miss
They're
them
just
all
out on the road right now.
They're all out racing, and
like every single one of them except for me and Luke.
And then it was just a great relaxed atmosphere, but also like a good field. Like, especially, I mean, if you looked at the 150, I mean, it was really stacked with competition. European people as well. So the guy who won the men's race, Simon Svensson, he's unbelievably strong. Women's race, I think Carolina Mignon, I think that she's Polish, but has a French last name. She finished on the podium, but it still kind of maintains that relaxed atmosphere, which is, it's an impressive feat to do that, to have a big race that does that. So
the spirit of gravel is alive at Gravel Worlds.
Yeah.
Those guys do work hard to kind of maintain the spirit of gravel. And I think, would they have their first to last party or something?
Yeah.
Party going until the last person comes home?
Yeah, so I was there till probably 8:30 after podiums, and then we left. We were pretty starving. Well, me, Luke, and two other guys. We got, we got not big thing of nachos, poutine, a couple other starters, and then like burgers and cheesesteaks. And we ate all of that. So we were pretty fried, and then we just like all the Long Voyage guys, we were just dead, and I had to drive 8 hours the next day. So sadly, I didn't get to go to that, but. That is definitely on the bucket list next year, which is because like it looked like quite the party. I mean, like everyone was there. Like it probably way more hype around that than the first finishers. Let's put it that way, which is cool to see. So.
For sure. So Long Voyage is 300 miles.
Yep. 303, unfortunately. Those last
303.
3. I mean, I could have used the 300. That would have been a little nicer.
Self-supported. You couldn't have. There were no aid stations. You can't have anyone giving you hand ups. You can't have people out on the course cheering you on. Like, it is old school, self-supported, long in the spirit of Trans Iowa. As I read the rules of the Long Voyage, I'm like, I am having nightmare flashbacks to Trans Iowa. I tried Trans Iowa 3 times, got rained out every one of them. But I'm like, that's pretty cool because it's Gravel Worlds itself. Like the other 3 races, 150, 75, and the 50K are, you download the route on your Garmin, and there's aid stations every 10 miles, and there's volunteers on every corner, and there's people cheering you on the whole way. And I rode with the Orange Mud guys one year, and they had somebody meet them with a cooler full of beer with 10 miles to go. And it's like, okay, this is, and the Long Voyage is not that. Like, there's a starting line drawn in the sand, and then there's a finish line, and 300 miles, 303. In between those 2 lines, go. What's that like heading off into and you start at 5 p.m.? Like you're heading off into the night all alone, no aid station to look forward to, no, like, your mom's not out there cheering you on, and the middle of the night, it's just you and your light and your bike and go. What is that like to you?
Yeah, I mean it's pretty daunting, and I will say this year that we did have I mean you could almost call it an aid station, but because it was available to everyone, they just decided it would be like a gas station. So Jamie Tracy, you might know like Christy Tracy and stuff. She was at Rattlesnake, and her husband set up his van at mile 136 with water and with bars and stuff, and so that was like a neutral aid. But yeah, I mean, it's everything else is you gotta go to gas stations, and I think when you're heading into a race like that, it's especially hard if you've done another one of them recently, because it's a I'd say like you have physical matches that you burn over the course of a season, like just in the grand scheme of things. You also have mental matches, and so if you were to go out and bury yourself every day doing VO2 intervals, you physically screw yourself, and mentally, I think you'd be like, I'm done with this. I'm going to quit the sport. And I think with the really long stuff, like it's a big mental drain. I mean, going into it, I was pretty fresh mentally, even though I had done Breck Epic the week before, and that was because Breck Epic was just as far as you could get, like just the polar opposite of what I was doing in Nebraska. Breck Epic's at between 9 and 12,000 feet, constantly up and down. There's no flat in that course. Obviously mountain biking, very different scenery, etc. Nebraska long voyage, the biggest descent we had was like, wow, look, we got this big descent. I was like with a group of guys in the middle of the night, like, guys, we got a big descent coming up, and I was like, 20 minutes, and I was joking because it was about a minute and a half long, and it was pedaling. It was like 2%. So I came into it pretty fresh, but you just know that no matter how good you feel, even 5 hours in, you're going to get to a point where you feel terrible. And you also know that, like, from experience, you're probably going to come out of the first few times you feel terrible. Like you go in cycles. Whereas most races, if you start feeling terrible, that's probably the end. The race is so long that you can start to kind of come back from that. So yeah, I mean, I think it's daunting, but at the same time, there's something really cool about racing overnight. Like it's surreal. Like the way I was just talking with Luke and a couple other guys like during the night, and I was like, it just feels like you're in this like dystopian world. Like no one else is alive on Earth, and there's just some like old like fat. You see like these refinery glowing lights, and we rode by this oil refinery or something like that once. And there was just train rail yard with like kind of stop trains and kind of the glowing just like amber lights, and it's hard to like put it into words now, but it's a really surreal feeling, and it feels like something you'd have nightmares about. Like
I mean, maybe you do. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's like maybe you're the only four people left on Earth, or five people left on Earth anymore, and there's just some old abandoned factories, and so it is very very surreal in that sense, and I think there's just no other type of racing that can come close to replicating that. I mean, I have personally not done any bike pack racing, and I would like to do that. But I think this sort of racing is cool because it still feels like feels like you're in a race. Like it's short enough that there's the tactical element and stuff like that, and you're able to race against people like you're close enough to them. But it's also long enough where you're able to experience like an entire night of riding through. So yeah, it's very cool.
Do you ever want to go to bed? Are you like?
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, I gotta like slap my face and wake myself up.
Yeah, it is a little disconcerting how suddenly you'll just feel really tired. Like I just want to go to sleep. And obviously, like you're riding gravel, you got to still be able to control your bike. And gravel worlds is generally very fast, and we can average like 19.5 miles an hour for the 300
Dude, that's
miles.
Crazy.
But it was sandy in some places at night, and not like sand where it's like, oh, we got to get off a walk. It's like the sand where suddenly it'll hit you, and your front wheel just like washes out really quickly. And during the daytime, you're like, no big deal. But when you're tired, your reaction time and ability to control your bike is laughably terrible. So that's, yeah. And I'd say like whenever I got tired, I just try and focus in a bit. I did take a fair bit of caffeine, but as I've learned, like I don't drink coffee normally, and I just use caffeine in races, but like the half-life of caffeine is pretty long. And so if I had a caffeine gel an hour previous, taking another one isn't necessarily going to help.
Hmm.
So I try to be careful with that because caffeine can also cause like upset stomach and stuff. But yeah, it's more just whenever I start to feel tired, is try not to think about it because like the more you think about it, the worse it gets. So
Do you know, like, are you aware of the time of day or night or morning?
unfortunately, yeah. I mean, so I one of the cool features of the Hammerhead crew, which I have, is there's a field called Time to Sunrise, which seems like a
Huh.
field that no one else uses, but I find it very useful. But at the same time, if you are stupid enough to flip to that page that has it at like 9 p.m. when it's just become dark and you see you have
Oh,
like 8 or 9 hours left of dark, it is almost terrifying. It's like, are you kidding me? Like I have to go through 8 or 9 hours in the dark, and then when you hit like 1 a.m. and it's still like five because the sun didn't rise till 6:45
oh wow.
in Nebraska, and it set pretty late. It set like 8:45 or something. But like when you realize you still have like 5 hours, you're like this is ridiculous. So it can become very very daunting. But luckily, being with somebody else really helps because you kind of commiserate. Like in a lot of races, I'd say you try and hide how you're feeling. In this race, you don't. Like me and Luke were just complaining. Like I was like, "Do you feel as bad as I do?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm in like a different place right now." I was like, "In a good place?" He's like, "No, I'm not in a good place right now mentally." And so, because you both know that you feel terrible. It's just like how who's going to feel the worst towards the end. That's who's going to lose the race, or who's going to feel the best. That's who's going to win the race. And at 1 a.m., one person could feel terrible, uh, and you think, "Oh, I've got this guy in the ropes. I'm going to beat him," and then it will flip. And that's pretty much what happened in the race. And you just don't know. But it's nice having company, definitely.
Yeah. Does sunrise give you life?
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I mean, I think it illustrates just how important the mental side of racing like this is, racing in general. But it is amazing how sunrise or even just getting near to the finish can like totally give you a second wind. And I think in the races like this, you definitely go deeper than you probably would in any other race. Not like deeper as in like I'm going to my maximum, like 5 minute power or something like that, but I like just have to really draw from those mental reserves and really just find something else. But yeah, sunrise is amazing, and in this case, it was absolutely spectacular. It had been thundering all night, like 40 miles away, which was great. Got a nice like lightning show, but we didn't have to deal with any of the consequences. And we woke up and there was these thunder heads, and it looked like there was almost like a fire. It was just spectacular, and even though we were both really cracked, me and Luke both commented like, we can't complain too much. This is absolutely beautiful, and there aren't too many people who get to experience that. So
Yeah, true. That's a great attitude to have, and the value of having good company.
exactly, yep.
Were I know, like, you guys finished half hour ahead of third place dude. Um, so I know at some point it was just the two of you. Where was it just the two of you?
Yeah, so I guess like kind of backing up a bit, me and Luke and one other guy, Connor, kind of went into the race with a little bit of a plan. Like we decided we were going to carry a lot of food and water and skip the 100-mile gas station. There's one town we passed through 100 miles. We felt like that would be the natural place that everyone would stop. Just makes sense. Round number, you're probably getting near the end of your water stores. So I carried 5 liters of water, which was way more than everyone else. And I probably carried enough food to stock a convenience store, which in hindsight, I kind of regret because, like, in the beginning, I felt amazing, but even the climbs, like, you just feel my bike just felt like a truck. But we skipped that and we went to 136. And so at mile 100, we left through it early on. Like I just put some pressure on, and me and Luke put some pressure on, and we thinned the group down to like 7, and then it was 6, and then it just became so flat. We realized there's no way we're dropping these other guys. Like
Huh.
not yet. So we just had to be patient. And I was probably a little impatient early on, putting a little burning too many notches, and it feels like you're going easy, but everything comes back to bite you in the end. But yeah, so mile 100, we dropped the other three guys, and then it was just me, Luke, and Connor. And we dropped Connor probably about an hour later, maybe. And then, yeah, me and Luke kept going to mile 216. And then it was just us till the finish. And like we had a few minor mishaps. Like I dropped my chain once. I had a hydration bladder in my frame bag, and I had like a magnetic clip to hold it onto hold the hose on the handlebars, and the clip fell off because I just taped it on, and the hose fell into my wheel, which was a little disconcerting. I was trying to like yank it out while riding. I was like, I just gotta stop.
boy.
And I had to change my axis battery. But the cool thing was like Luke could have easily just said, I'm gonna, make it hard for you to come back and just make you burn some matches. But he didn't. He just was like, no, we have this plan. We're gonna, go through the night together at least, and then see. And yeah, I think that's one of the things about these races. Like there was a point when he was really on the ropes, and it would have been easy to say, oh, like now I should go. But then it's like, well, I'm going to have 8 hours of riding alone most of that, and night, or 7 hours of riding alone. That's going to suck.
Right.
So it's just like, and you have to remember, like, it can feel like, oh, I only have 80 miles left. I'm so close. Like I need to start thinking about racing, but it's like, you still have 80 miles left. Like in most races, you'd be in the early part of your race. So,
right.
you
right.
have to kind of reframe things, say like, even if I get to 30 miles to go and I'm still with another guy, it's not the end of the world. We still got 30 miles left to decide this race.
Yeah.
So,
I don't have to drop him right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Yep.
All right, man. Take me into the finish.
Yeah. So I, got through 300 miles of the 303 miles and then broke my spoke in the rear. I broke a spoke in the rear, which didn't affect the race at all. And I got, so lucky because typically you break a spoke and it will poke through the rim tape and then you flat. Right. And if you do that, you're kind of screwed because you can't, you got to put a tube in. But the problem is then you have a spoke poking through, which is probably going to pop the tube. Yeah, you got to take the spoke out. And so that would have been a nightmare. But I just heard this thing hitting against my frame, which is also not a nice sound, by the way, when you know that you get this piece of metal just every rotation scratching against your frame.
I believe it or not, I actually know that sound well. So yeah, it is very disconcerting. Every time it thwops against your frame, you're like, oh, what's that scratch like? Oh, what is it doing to my frame?
Luckily, I have a wrapped frame, but yeah, that was a little disconcerting, but I was just like, just make it through. And I got pretty distracted, and like, to be honest, Luke was clearly the strongest in the last couple hours. And I think if it had come down to like, if I'd been able to like stick with him until the last corner, I think I could have had him and I think he knew this, he was much worse at cornering than me. And in the last corner was very awkward and just like big chunky rocks and stuff. And I thought it was like, maybe I can get him there. But yeah, he got me a bit in the climb, and that was it. And honestly, like, it's really funny when you're at the end of the race that long. Like, he could be 100 yards ahead, and there could be like a quarter mile left in the race, and you're like, I still can catch him because the race is so long. You have this like skewed perception of reality. But yeah, honestly, I was really happy for him. He's a very good friend. He's a really good guy, and I'd say in most races this long, you're going to at some point get really mad at the guy you're with because you get to a point where you're just so done with it. You just hate the stupid race, and you just want to be, lying in your bed, and you get grumpy. But there wasn't a single moment of that during the entire night, which says a lot about him. I think as a person that like, he's not somebody that I'd be able to get mad at. And, it was really cool because he's had a rough season. He had a rough start of the season as well, similar to me. He was up the track. He was going to do the 560 kilometers because he's even crazier than me, and it got canceled because of weather. And then he had a concussion at Unbound XL, and so we both had kind of issues early in the season, and to kind of put this together and pretty much have our plan work exactly as we wanted. Like I literally said to him before, I'm like, I hope it just ends up being the two of us at night. Which that sounds really terrible, but no, but it was just like he's exactly the person. Like there's no bullshit. He just is gonna take pulls, and you kind of both know what to do, and that was exactly the case. And it was a great way to to finish, and it was funny because we then went out to dinner with he and a few other people because despite after spending 15 hours with him, apparently I was cool spending another few hours with him. So
Hey, if there's food
we're still on
involved,
good
though,
terms. That's good.
that's awesome. He got you by 20 seconds, and I said to you, like, "Oh my gosh, it was a sprint finish." Did it feel like he was 1,000 miles away, or did it feel like a sprint?
I mean, I'll be honest. I think once I realized he's got a little bit of gap, I was like, I don't think I can close this, and I don't even mentally. I was just so done. I was like, I just honestly like, I just want to get to the finish. And I think when I saw downhill and I realized where we were, and I was like, oh wait, there's the finish because it was like at this big expo center. So it's like in big Nebraska. It's where they do cattle shows. And we finished on a rodeo, like in the rodeo ground. There's these massive pavilions where they do like livestock sales and stuff like that. And I saw all these buildings. I'm like, oh hell yeah! And that was all I could think about at that point. And at that point, I was like, there's no way he's been so much stronger than me. And maybe he was bluffing or something, but if he was, he did a really good job. And yeah, I think once he turned left into like the fairground area, I was like, there's no way I'm catching him. And also just like the fact that I was able to finish with my broken spoke and without having to stop and walk the last 3 miles, I was pretty darn happy when I finished.
For
Because
sure.
I mean, I didn't hit anything, so I didn't hit a stick or anything, as far as I know. I think it was just my bike was so heavy, and I raced this wheel set all year. It probably was a little bit out of true, and just the repetitive motion probably had a little bit more strain on one spoke. But it waited till mile 300 out of 303 to break. Like
Yeah, thank goodness.
it was quite lucky. So
Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
I'd say overall just very very happy with that. So
I'm pretty sure it's all those watts. Those,
I wish my max power was more than 1,000 watts. And like, I mean, even if it had come down to a actual like half a second bunch sprint, I'm gonna guess that neither of us would have broken 500 or 600 watts. Like it's that you get to a point where like 300 watts feels pretty hard. And I'd say this is the best I felt in any long distance race. Like I was still taking pulls at like 300 for very far into the race, but
wow.
you lose that top end so fast. And yeah, I mean, I think that's also like, kind of getting to like the professional side. I know that World Tour professionals are not doing 300-mile gravel races or 15-hour gravel races, but what sets them apart is like people are like, oh, like I can do that 5-minute power. And I'm like, yeah, you can do it fresh. Like
Right,
when you're totally fresh and you're
right.
peaking.
Not after 200K of
Not
going
after
up and down.
200K in stage 15 of a race. Like, and
Correct.
that's the difference. And like,
Yeah.
and I think that's also the thing with these long races is like, it's whoever is freshest at the end, they're gonna win. It's not like, oh, who's the strongest in the beginning, who's the strongest in the middle. It's like, if you can be really, really conservative, really just save every match, be really smart, and be fresh in the end, like that's when it matters. And it's amazingly hard to remind that of yourself when you're an hour in a race this long. It feels, oh, this feels so easy. This is so nice. This is gonna be such a nice night. And then you realize, yeah, just you wait. So
Yeah. It better feel super easy 1 hour in.
yeah, exactly. And I knew I wanted to make it hard enough that like we thin the group out because I really don't want to ride with 30 people at night. Like
Yeah.
that would be
Yeah, that's fair.
terrifying. And so I was like, no, like we're not going into the nighttime with more than like 5 or 10 people max. Like I do not want to be with
Yeah.
a big group. So you get to push it a bit, but even then, like you look at your power graph and it's like, wow, the first 3 hours felt so easy, and you realize, well, the first 3 hours were by far the highest power, like by far the highest power, even though it, by normal race standards, you'd be like the group would just be massive. You wouldn't be able to drop anyone. But
Yeah. Right.
it's a very different approach than really any other events.
Huh. Well, cool. Congratulations. I'm stoked
Thank
to
you.
have you on. It's I don't know, 2 weeks post Gravel Worlds, maybe a
Yep,
week and a
something like
half,
that.
2 weeks.
Week and a half. Yep.
Um, and you're not done racing. I saw your name, and I want to ask you about this. I saw your name on the Gravel National Championship race roster. But you're going to Lander, Wyoming instead. Tell me about that race.
Yeah, so I just decided I needed a bit of a break from some of the big racing because I'm going to be doing, depending on how Marathon Worlds pans out, that will be my next race. And then no matter what, I've been doing Little Sugar and Big Sugar at the end of the season. So there's some pretty big events to finish off with. And yeah, this one was just like kind of popped up. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I talked with him a bit, and it's up in Lander, Wyoming. It's 131 miles. It seems like just a good like local event. It's a 6-hour drive, which by my standards now in Colorado is very short, or not too long. So pretty chill. Just drive out there tomorrow, have a day there before, and then drive back on Sunday after the race. Yeah, and then convince my mom to come out. So she's going to be racing, which is really cool. She's going to be doing the 75, and I guess it will be a race to see. So she starts a fair bit later than I do, so it'll be a race to see who can finish first, I guess. She has a lot less distance, but she's also starting later than me. So yeah, it'll be a cool event, and it's not super big. It's not like you go there and have this huge prize purse. You're not going to qualify like gravel nationals. You can qualify for gravel world championships, but like that doesn't interest me. I think racing in like gravel worlds or gravel world championships, the UCI ones are in Belgium this year, and I'm going to imagine it's going to be like a Belgian kermesse or like a road race, and I definitely cannot handle that. Like, no way. So that does not interest me. So this would just be a good kind of fun way to get some racing in. It's really just going to be like a training event. So a lot of these smaller events, I'll kind of train through them and use it as like a big training effort. And yeah, it's just a fun way. There's always good community. There's always good after parties and stuff like that. So.
Spirit of Gravel lives in Lander, Wyoming.
Yeah, and also I've never been to Lander, so it'll be
there
cool.
You go.
It's another way to see. Like that's the great thing about gravel. One of the nice things about gravel is you get to meet really cool people, and you get to see areas you probably wouldn't go to otherwise. So that's a cool thing.
And really dive into that area.
Yeah. You get to know it really well. Sometimes a little too well. Let's put it that way.
Right, for sure. Yeah, like glowing oil refineries in the middle of the night with abandoned railways and.
Well, you get to know all the wildlife as well at night. Man, that was another thing about this race is the number of close calls. Like now I realize why. Oh yeah, like people hit animals at night in their cars all the time, and it's the same with bikes. Like so many white-tailed deer, and it'd be like you have one run out in front of you, and if there's one deer that ran out in front of you, there's going to be a second and third, and so you'd be like, oh, where is it? And then you have the lights that you're using when there's a guy behind you. There's all these shadows being cast, and so your mind starts playing tricks with you. You're like, oh my god, it's an animal! And we saw a couple of skunks, we saw a couple of possum, one that almost went right in front of Luke. A lot of deer. I mean. Yeah, you get to know all the flora and fauna, I would say. So yeah.
Oh, well, that's awesome. I'm stoked for you, man. Let us know about snowshoe.
Yeah, I will do that. Crossing my fingers
for you to get in.
We'll see.
Dig it. Well, I'm gonna let you head on to dinner, maybe.
Yeah, definitely dinner, and then pack up for tomorrow, and then probably gonna try and get out early and ride before I drive. Although, of course, tomorrow's the one day it's going to be raining early in the morning. But we'll deal with that when I wake up. So,
all right. Good luck, man. Keep in touch, and thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. And I'll let you know about Snowshoe, and look forward to seeing you next year at Rattlesnake, especially. So,
all right, we're in.
Awesome.
I got to thank Chris a ton for hopping on a call and sharing his great stories. We'll all be rooting for the Stars and Stripes if he heads over to Snowshoe for the UCI Mountain Bike Marathon World Champs. Be sure and give him a follow on Instagram or see what he's up to on his website, chrismehlman.com. Links in the show notes. And it is cross season. Cross is here. And I'd like to invite y'all to Capital City Cross. It's another great weekend of racing, September 21st and 22nd in Iowa's new capital city of Des Moines. Des Moines is the new capital city. That's where Capital City Cross is. Anyway, come join the Bike Iowa racing team for a weekend of cyclocross and fun and All the info you need is at bikeiowa.com. I also got to give a plug out to the Iowa Single Speed Gravel Championship on October 5th. 77.7 miles, starting and finishing on a beautiful private property southwest of Des Moines, and it's free. Remember those things? You know, the old postcard entry forms, no fees, totally grassroots. It's free. And if you don't want to rip around for 77 miles on your single speed, you can do the 37 miler on any bike you want, gears and all. Again, for free. I just think that's awesome. Look for the Limestone 77.7 on Bike Reg and get signed up. And for bonus, there is a Friday night and Saturday night cyclocross race on the same property. Camping, beer, music, food, and cross. What a great weekend in Cumming, Iowa. Yes, you heard that correctly. Cumming, Iowa. Look it up. It's a real thing. So if you do come, be sure and stop by the Cumming Tap and say hey to Bob. He's a cyclist and a great dude. I'm not making any of that up. Also, I am going to put out a challenge for all the single speeders for the Single Speed Galactic Worldwide Universal Champion of Saturn and Jupiter. There is a single speed race on Friday night at 10 p.m. on the cross course. And then the 77.7 miler on Saturday. And on Saturday night are more cross races that conclude with, you guessed it, a single speed race. So I'm going to have some kind of prize for the person with the lowest overall score. The score is your placement in each 3 of those races, and we'll have a prize for you. If anybody does it, you should get a tiara because you are a champion. Anyway, try the old Bike Talk with Dave Single Speed Galactic Championships, October 4th and 5th. There you go. All that stuff can be found on bikeiowa.com. All right, that's enough. I want to thank you for tuning in today. I appreciate it, and I would love it if you would rate and review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you want to support this show financially and help me keep the lights on and all of my subscriptions to keep this thing flowing, I would truly appreciate it. You can go to buymeacoffee.com and look for Bike Talk with Dave. There's a link in the show notes, I promise. Thanks tons again for tuning in. Hope to see you at some races soon. Thanks again, Chris Mehlman, for joining me. Hope you have a great week. And remember that nothing compares with the simple pleasure of riding a bicycle.